so this is probably going to be the final part of this particular test. I just have to quickly explain to people. I came up with an idea with Roy. What we're going to try and do is obviously put these onto YouTube, like we said, but maybe join them together and put them onto some sort of media sharing website, server somewhere, in order for people that want to watch the whole thing and don't want to have to sit and watch it in parts. So this may well sound a little bit disjointed if we piece them all together and put them as one file somewhere else. So we'll carry on where we left off. Roy, I don't know if you've got anything that you want to mention. If you've got any other.
Or could put commercial breaks between the segments. I'm just joking though. I think we're just planning to do one video at first. We still improve as this episode kind of gets along. Now at the bottom, let me just try and point this out. We still try and do the synchronization issues. Okay. So at the bottom, let me just see if I get this right. I put the title of the episode. It just says Introduction and Testing. It doesn't say anything too interesting. In the future, we hope to have some titles or some kind of descriptions of the episodes, which will be a bit complicated if we do it in advance. I mean, when we do the audio-based shows, we first record, we talk about whatever takes our fancy in a way, and then we decide on a title for the show. In this case, we're going to have to decide in advance because we put the banners at basically while we're doing the recording of the show. I see Tim's basically playing with his RSS feeder. Do you mind introducing people to the things you read and what you find useful to
them? I mean, this is no trade secret or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that for 1 minute. But what I'm doing here is, this is where I have my system set up. I'm using Thunderbird and I have my RSS feeds down the side here. And I've also got what you can't see, which is just off the image, I believe, is going to be my Usenet subscriptions to the news group. So I've got currently up on the screen, and you should see part of is Compos Linux Advocacy, and that's one of the news groups I thoroughly enjoy reading. It's all in one, and this is what I'll use to pull up some news, and sometimes during the show on the TechBytes show, I'll be looking through this just to see if there's anything else I can throw in, and any topics of interest. So that's basically what it does. There's nothing particularly amazing there. I've still got my Minecraft.
You mentioned you mentioned the news groups, the advocacy news groups.
Yes.
This is where we have quite a few trolls watching the show and mentioning the show. And I suppose they're going to watch this video too. So we're quite thankful, for people who are trying to heckle the show and to insult people. And by doing so, they actually give links to the show and get more people exposed to the things we do. Unintentionally, of course. And it's interesting because it's really, you know what they say, usually just ignore the trolls, don't feed the trolls, or don't feed any person who you don't really want people to pay attention to. In this case, I suppose the trolls have a bit of a dilemma, because one thing they could do is just completely ignore people whom they don't like, and that'd be fine, but they would not feel like they do anything that they feel like the impulse to do. And when they do try to confront us or to insult us, what they actually do is they actually give us attention in some way. Not necessarily to the people they try to approach. What they do is they also open up the window for people, who basically wouldn't watch the show, and they make it known that the show exists. And that'll be pretty nice if they carry on doing that. They try to harm the show. They try to insult us. They try to cause lots of trouble. They pretty much do the opposite. So I don't mind personally.
Well, there was a famous man, and some of the people who are watching this or listening to this might be shocked to hear, but I'm a big wrestling fan, WWE wrestling fan. There's a very famous wrestler called Ric Flair who made, I think, a very intelligent comment. He said, to be loved is great, and to be hated is great. It's gross indifference or apathy, that's the killer. So certainly there's a lot of shows that have made a career on people having very harsh remarks about them. So I think Roy, speak for Roy here as well, when I say we're very welcoming of all feedback that we get, whether it's negative or positive. And it's nice to know that people are watching a show. If they watch a show and can't stand it, well, obviously tell us why, and we'd be very interested to hear why. But have we got any news? Anything that we can just quickly throw in on this particular little segment, just as our closing piece? If you've got anything pressing that you want to bring up on?
Major news. There was Antics released. Do you know Antics? It's based on Mepis. And the reason it's called Antics with an X at the end, it's because it's kind of like antiques. So it's actually for old computers. It's supposed to be a very lightweight distribution. That's been released. Slackware was released about a week ago, maybe, and they actually chose a code name that's not code name, actually a number of the release. It's interesting because it's supposed to say late, so it's 1337, yeah. And of course Ubuntu was released the same week, so nobody pays attention to the other distros. And I'm starting to see feedback on the Unity situation, and one person told me they might actually go back to Shell or go back to the mainstream, the upstream, GNOME distribution or desktop. I don't know if it's true. I was asking for a link and I couldn't get the person to give me a link to support his claim. But this relates to the interview we had with Jono, which I very much enjoyed, basically. He's always a very interesting person to speak to, and we speak to him in IRC almost on a daily basis. But what I do hope to find, though, is the deluge of Ubuntu news. You know, you look at the Linux sites, the ones I look, they actually bundle all the Ubuntu news together because there is so much of that, and so little about the other distributions that it's becoming a bit of a almost monocultural, kind of almost boring experience reading the news. There is no competition between distros. There isn't as much as there used to be, and I think it's always interesting to have a bit of a fight between an underdog sort of desktop environment, some new exciting thing competing against something else, and you think, well, in this case, in the case of the desktop environments, you mostly depend on what's delivered with distributions like Ubuntu and Fedora, and I think both of them deliver by default the GNOME desktop. So there isn't, I don't know how to explain that. I don't feel like there is as much choice as there used to be in Linux now, unless of course you're willing to go for one of the less mainstream or the less frequently discussed distributions. So, and this is why even when it comes to news, I wrote some summaries of news today and I couldn't find any major breakthrough or anything that's worthy of mentioning. But one thing, did you hear about the PlayStation 3?
Yes, I saw your article. You wrote about this today.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the credit card fiasco and everything else, they put Linux back on the PlayStation. My understanding is that they exploit the hack to make it very easily installable on any PlayStation 3.
Officially from Sony, though, is it?
No, of course not. Of course not.
Yeah.
So Sony has decided that Linux is a very, very nasty piece of software. You know, because I think the concern they had, and we had this discussion before, is people getting too close to controlling their consoles, and then people not buying the consoles to so-called, to be consumers, so-called consumers of games, but they just buy the consoles for the hardware, and that's not very good business for Sony, I suppose, because of the production costs and other, I suppose, all kinds of concerns also about the ripping of films, because of course you have to remember Sony is also a producer or a mediator when it comes to things like films and music. So Sony also has an interest in ensuring we don't have control of the media that we use, and we cannot actually rip songs, we cannot even put the songs that we downloaded onto a device that's owned by Sony, let's say a media player, onto a different form of media that's more convenient for us to use. So if you buy a song online, they aren't so happy with you putting it on a different medium. Okay, so and that's just an issue in general, because.
Well, I've got a question for you, actually, Roy. It's actually related to this, and you just reminded me. Anybody who's reading my dents, I think I mentioned this a few times in the TechBytes IRC channel. But about 3 weeks ago, I bought the new Harry Potter on Blu-ray, the Deathly Hallows Part 1. And I never got around to watching it. Everything started to happen every time I tried to go down to watch it. So it took me a few weeks to get around to watching it. But when I opened the box, there was the Blu-ray version, which obviously I paid for. But then given away free was the DVD version as well. And also a free digital download of the of Harry Potter. And this was all for, I think it was £17. My wife paid for it at Tesco's or somewhere similar to that. But it did puzzle me, because obviously I had no need for the DVD version, and I didn't know how legally I stand with that DVD version that was included in my pack. am I allowed to give that away to somebody? At the moment, it's sitting in my box with my Blu-ray version, but am I allowed to give that to a friend who hasn't seen the Deathly Hallows and give them effectively the original? Or am I not? There was no sort of terms and conditions that I could see in there that says I couldn't. All it said on the disc was not for rental. And I didn't know if you knew about it, the law respected that, or if...
it's one of those blurry things that involves you could have a guest watching it with you, right? So you could actually give them a presentation. I think there was an attempt a few years back, I wrote about it at the time, to somehow enforce, I don't really know how this would work, but they thought about finding a way of saying, well, you can only watch this football game if you are X number of people. Of course, in the States, it's quite, well, even in here, I suppose, football, American football, or just soccer, as they call it. It's becoming very commonplace now to pay for games on demand, or just watching something live by paying a certain fee. That didn't exactly exist about 10 years ago, but that's very common now. The question is, could you pay whatever £5 to watch a certain football game and bring 10 friends of yours to your house to watch it with you? And these companies are trying to limit the availability of content. They try to say, well, this is like merchandise, and if you watch it with too many people, they're stealing something. That's probably the type of words they'd use, that this is piracy. But how do they check that? Do they try to specify the size of the screen, perhaps? I think this is one of the things they might have in mind, is saying, well, if it's 40-inch screen, it might be more people watching it at the same time, so you have to pay more.
I mean, it just confused me, because we're told, I'm unsure about the laws in distribution, etc. But obviously, I've paid for Harry Potter: The Deathly Hallows Part 1. I have a DVD copy of it, which I'm never ever going to watch, never ever going to use, which is sitting in the same box, which is obviously an original. And am I legally allowed? I mean, I know in theory they could never police it, but am I legally allowed to give it to like a neighbour or my brother-in-law, as I intended to do? Which is just an interesting point, and it is very interesting that they're doing this. I've put it up on the screen now. This is the one. It wasn't £17, it's £14. So I think my good lady wife paid for it. But it's triple play. It's a digital copy as well, DVD and Blu-ray. It's very interesting that they start to release titles. Well, 3 titles for the price of 1, effectively. So just as something I was going to add there, if anybody's answered, I'd like to hear the feedback.
If you're stealing these things, right? If they claim that you can steal these things, they give you 3. Okay, they call it triple play. Does it cost them three times as much to give it to you?
I'm not. Yeah.
I mean, think about it. This just shows you the notion of abundance. They could make as many copies as they want and produce them to you. If you're going to share these copies with people who would have never bought this film in the first place, they don't lose anything. In fact, they get more exposure, more people recommending the film. So it does kind of make me wonder, if they give you all these copies, you can get a digital copy yourself and give 2 copies to friends. Now, what do they think? Maybe they think, maybe this is not such a bad idea. If we expect this number of sales, lots of people went to the big hardcore Harry Potter fans, they went to the cinema and watched that. Okay, so they've already paid good money to watch that, and they might get the DVD anyway. So the number of people who would be, possibly lost customers or lost business is limited by the fact that the people who really like the series have already watched the thing. If you're going to give away a copy of that, it's likely to be to a person who's quite apathetic towards Harry Potter, because another person might already have watched it, or may have downloaded a version, possibly illegally. And if you're going to give somebody a copy, the question is, was this a lost sale, or was it an increased audience? I don't really know the answer, but lots of those companies will occasionally kind of slip out the fact that they realize that the economics there are quite complicated, and in fact they could profit more if they produce more copies and flood the market with copies. Not necessarily in torrent form, but just give you 3 copies and say, well, do whatever you want with them, because we're not going to police you unless you sell them in the streets in mass quantities. We'll be fine. You
It's
use your friend.
just an interesting little side one. I mean, I very rarely go shopping. It's the bane of my life, actually physically shopping in a supermarket. But my wife very kindly brought it back to me as a surprise. Yeah, it was just interesting, especially in a day when they're claiming that there's a massive loss of profit through piracy, and yet I've got 3 copies effectively of the same title for one price. I'll leave it there with the Harry Potter.
Yeah, we probably should.
Shows.
I think we also approach the threshold of the uploads to YouTube, and hopefully they will increase the quota of because what they do is they usually limit things to an upload of about 15 minutes in my case, and this is why we also do it in segments like that. And we will hopefully improve in the episode too. We will try and do things a bit more properly. We'll try to fix a few settings. I carry on changing settings to tell you the truth. In between sessions I'm actually watching what we did, and I'm trying to change a few parameters.